Welcome to this episode of Relentless Endeavor's Let's Talk podcast to get the generations talking. I am Sherry Thompson, Director of Relentless Endeavor, representing the Boomer and Gen X generations. And with me is Peter Thompson from the Millennial generation. Our hope is that through these discussions, you will not only learn about different generations, but that you'll also find talking points to get your own discussion started with those of a different generation. Today's topic is gratitude. Being thankful for the way other generations do things. So let's face it, we often look at other generations and wonder, what in the world are they thinking? So let's just start off with a little bit of fun. Peter, what is something about older generations that makes you just shake your head and go, oh my gosh, what were they or what are they thinking?
I would say one thing is it's a lot of it comes back to communication. We were talking about this actually at my job today. How some older people will, they'll say things or they'll communicate things in a certain way. Like they'll type in all caps, and they don't. Some don't know any better, and I can accept that. But sometimes they'll like type in all caps if they're like texting or something, and then they'll switch back to regular, and that tells me that they know they're yelling. Like I would never. To me, all caps it like communicates like emphasis or excitement. Where I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
Or not necessarily like yelling, oh my gosh, but I'm putting emphasis on it. So that's one thing. I think a lot of it is just like not paying attention to certain things. My manager at work today
Give an
was
example.
talking, and just how things can change and be different. Like we've got family members that don't necessarily pay attention to what group text they're in. And they'll start talking about stuff from one group chat in another group chat. And I'm just like, I don't really need to know about your Costco order, but okay. And
why
my
is this
manager was like,
happening?
oh my gosh, my parents do that too.
Why am I in this conversation?
So, yeah, so some of it is that, and it just tells me that you're not like, it just tells me that the person doing that isn't paying attention. And it's like, how hard is it to just pay attention? But to them, it's all, I'm talking to somebody on my cell phone. And to me, there's a very specific channel that I'm trying to communicate in right now, whether it's a specific app or specific conversation. And I look at it at the conversation level. I'm saying this thing to this person or this group or whatever, versus as someone from an older generation. It's just like, I'm talking to somebody on my phone. It doesn't matter if it's Facebook Messenger or Instagram DM or my email or my text message. Like it's all just happening on the phone. So it doesn't really matter. And I think that lack of
keep in mind, some of that is they can't see.
Bugs me.
Yeah. Keep in mind, some of it is they can't see.
Yeah. There's definitely a physical
it's so
aspect
tiny
to that.
And yeah, there's a little bit of that. So, but yes, I have that situation going on as well. But I guess for me, the thing is, when I see a room full of young people, younger generations, all on their phone, sitting in the same room, nobody's talking to each other. They're just all on their phone. And so that's something that just makes me go, why aren't y'all talking to each other? Why are you sitting in the same room but not talking to each other? And you're not like you're watching the same movie. You're all on your phone. So that's just something that makes me go, what in the world is happening here? But I also know that we have all sat in our living room with all of us on our phones, and every once in a while went, hey, look at this video, or did you see this post today? And so it's kind of like you're sharing the news every once in a while. I don't know. Anyway, those are the things. So let's talk about gratitude for a minute. So gratitude, we're going to talk about gratitude as a feeling first, because it has to start in our minds and our hearts. Because if my attitude toward other people lacks gratitude for what they bring to the table, then my actions are certainly not going to follow it, because people can sense that falsehood. if I'm just acting a certain way, but I really don't feel it. Um, and gratitude actually takes humility. It means that I have to recognize that I am benefiting from someone else's work or their words. And if I'm only focused on myself, I can't see that. There's an author, John Ortberg, says that gratitude liberates us from the prison of self preoccupation, which I love that, because if you're going to be grateful, most people don't stand around going, I'm so grateful for who I am and what I've done. And I mean, I guess really troubled people might, but that's really bad. If you stand around just talking about how grateful you are that you're so cool and you're so wonderful, you have to really think about other people to practice gratitude. So it takes some humility. And we're going to get into entitlement more in a future podcast, but I do want to point out that I think since entitlement is such a problem these days, that gratitude could absolutely change that. Um, it can also help us have a more positive attitude just in general. If you're looking for things to be grateful for, it's really hard to always be downer, have a downer attitude. So in the spirit of practicing some gratitude, Peter, what is something about older generations that you do appreciate or that you are grateful for?
There's definitely an aspect of striving for excellence that I see lacking in a lot of younger generations. I think millennials kind of straddle the line a little bit when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to not just like, because you could boil it down to work ethic, and that's just not like the case necessarily. Like, it's not just about work ethic, it's about like doing it right. And I actually saw somebody talking about this online literally this week, where they were talking about like the tools, like just the physical tools, the environment that older generations grew up in
Mm-hmm.
did not allow for as many mistakes. Um, if you were writing with a pen on a piece of paper, if you screwed up, if you got 2/3 of the way down the page and you screwed up, whiteout didn't exist for a long time. So you couldn't
Well, that is
necessarily
true.
just, white that out. Even typewriters, you had to start the piece of paper over. So like the tools themselves were not as forgiving as an iPad with the Notes app or a digital camera where you can just take as many pictures as you want and pick the one that you feel is best. And that's not even getting into like photo and video editing stuff. Like the ability to generate things is the barrier for entry to that is significantly lower. So you don't have to try as hard these days.
That makes a lot
And
of sense. Yeah.
I definitely think there's a line between I definitely think there's a line between like the perfectionism that a lot of the older generations have, where they're like, well, if I can't do it, I don't want to do it. If I can't do it perfect, I don't want to do it at all. Well, there is an aspect of you need to fail in order to get better, and that's a
Sure.
part of
Sure.
it. But I think a lot of people in modern day culture kind of they don't go back and retry necessarily.
Hmm.
Like the concept of a rough draft is kind of is missing from starting in the millennial generation. I'm going to tell you this right now. I can think of maybe 2 or 3 papers I ever did more than one draft on in all of high school and college. Like
Yeah.
ever. I have an English degree. I have a degree in creative writing for entertainment. The only time I ever revised work was when it was part of a homework assignment. Like, all right, you turned in this draft for this
Right.
week. So for next week, you have to make it better. You have to change things. There has to be
Revise
like
that one. Sure.
differentiation between the two. That's the only time I ever did that. But if it was just like a straight up regular, like a 5-page paper, I wrote that rough draft. I ran spell check. I made sure there weren't any awkward pauses. But like, as far as like going back and like completely doing another draft, never did it. Never did it once.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I think
technology did
millennials were
help
kind
with
of the
that, but
beginning of
yes.
the just get it. Well, yeah, but like the just get it done attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it is like there's just a lot more like work required around things like that. Like I put more thought and effort into a lot of my work emails that I send these days than I did into
Mm-hmm.
a lot of papers that I wrote just because I knew the paper was going for a grade and that's it versus I'm kind of the front face of my company to an extent
Yeah.
for a lot
No.
of these
That.
emails that I
Yeah.
send.
No.
So I would say back to the initial question, what's something about the older generations I appreciate? They strove for excellence in everything that they did
Okay.
because if they were only going to get one, maybe two shots at it. They were going to give it their all. They didn't get 10 chances to do something. They got one. Versus today where it's like, oh, it's whatever. I get 10 chances at this. I'll just kind of do whatever at first. And if I don't like it, I'll come back and do it later. And then most people don't do it later. They just leave it as is.
There you go. Okay. Well, good to know. I would say for me, I so appreciate younger generation's willingness to try new things. And now every generation has had to have some of that, try new things. But I still think that the millennial generation in particular has that kind of like the old pioneer American spirit that I think we so need right now. That willingness to let's just go see what's out there. Let's see how this can work. Let's try this business. Let's try this computer program. Let's see how this is, if there's a problem on the computer, they're just like, well, let's get in here and figure it out. Lots of startup businesses. I'll just try this. I want to try living in this place, or I want to try this as a solution to a problem. I just love that spirit of let's just try it and see what happens. I grew up with, lots of pre-planning and lots of thinking, ahead of time, there's value in all of that. But sometimes we didn't try because we didn't know how it was going to turn out. And I love that millennials just are like, well, no, let's just go try it. So, and I think we need that. I think there's problems in our world and in our country that need that millennial thinking of, well, let's try and see if let's try this and see if it works. Let's try this and see if it works. And that kind of that willingness to even fail, and because it's really not failing, it's learning. So I that's something that I appreciate about millennial generations. I don't know that I see that so much in Gen Z and the generations following, but I definitely see it in millennials. Okay, so let's talk about gratitude as an action. Peter, how do you think people show gratitude today? What is something that, I just had a birthday and I automatically sat down and wrote my thank you cards. But I know that is a totally generational thing, because that is just something that past the boomer and Gen X generation, I don't think people do as a standard. This is what you do. This is what you're supposed to do. So I don't know that cards are necessarily a show of gratitude, but how do you think people show gratitude, or what is something that someone has done to you or for you that showed that they were grateful, that meant a lot to you?
I would say a lot of it just comes down to there's a lot of different things that kind of tie into it. Some of it is some of it just goes simply back to some of it just goes back to the 5 love languages, like how do you like receive affection, basically. So that's some of it. And if someone receives affection in one way and people are trying to show their gratitude and it's not that way, it's a little bit more difficult, unless you know about them, and then you can look at it through that lens and say,
right.
Oh, they're trying to show me gratitude. They're showing. I recently went to a wedding of a friend, and I saw him there, I had some fun, and then I texted him a couple days later about something completely different. And I, was just, I asked him a question. We were going back and forth. And when I got my answer to the question, I texted him in the same conversation. Oh, by the way, had a great time at your wedding. Thanks for inviting us. And he was like, oh, yeah, absolutely. It was great to have you guys there. Great to see you. Da, 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 da. And that just simple thank you was probably enough. I mean, it was enough for me for him to say, oh, it was great to have you there. Like, that was enough for me. I think it was probably enough for him. You get into gender dynamics this way a little bit too. Like, most guys are not going to send their guy friends a thank you note for something. So there is that. But I would say something like a simple text. I actually meant to text you the other night and say, thanks for having a fire pit. It was a lot of fun to hang out with people. And I just forgot to. I actually have a thank you text I need to send. I do have that message unread, so I know I can get to it before the end of the night. So I know I'll do
There you
that.
go.
A lot of it just comes down to, how do you communicate it? For me, a lot of it is through text message, just because that's where a lot of my communication takes place in general.
So getting a text thank you is just as meaningful as getting a card in the mail that says thank you.
I would say yeah, because part of it is like if I get a card, I don't know how long I'm supposed to keep them for. So if I get a thank you card, it feels weird to throw it away immediately, but then also I don't want to hang on to it forever. But mentally for me, there's eventually a tipping point where it's like, okay, but I've held on to this thing for so long. I don't want to throw it away now because I've held on to it for so long. My wife does not suffer from that delusion at all. She's like, no, do we need
It
it? No. Okay, cool.
just throws it right
We've,
away.
yeah.
I never even
Yeah.
thought
Not like
about
immediately. It
that.
sits.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've got birthday cards from years ago. Because it feels weird to throw it away because it feels like such because again, generational gap, it feels like such a big thing to me to send somebody a card. I don't want to just throw it away necessarily.
Right.
Um,
Oh,
and there's
I
some
have a
things
hard time throwing
I'll
cards
never
away.
there's some things on yeah, and there's some things I'll never throw away. It's not necessarily a card, but like I have programs from funerals that I've been to for some of my friends. I'm never going to throw that away. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's just,
Yeah.
it feels weird to throw it away. And I'm not going to do it. It's going to sit in a folder and I'm not going to like have it up on a bulletin board necessarily. Like I'm not going to like have it there,
No,
but
I get it. I get it.
it feels it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely, but when it comes to gratitude, yeah, a card feels like too big of a thing. It almost feels like a responsibility to keep it versus a
Okay.
text. You haven't given me that obligation. Oh my gosh, this is that episode of The Big Bang Theory where Sheldon's talking about how he doesn't like when people give him gifts because then he feels obligated to
Right.
return
He feels
the
obligated.
sentiment. And he's like,
Uh-huh.
you have not given me a gift, you have given me an obligation. That's a little bit of what
Me.
it feels like. If it's
That's
just a text message
yeah,
and it's
okay.
easy to respond to, I don't feel like mentally weighed down by that necessarily. Versus like if someone gives me a Christmas gift and I haven't gotten them one, oh boy, that's no bueno. I feel really bad. So I kind of understand that viewpoint. So how
Well,
people,
I already addressed my cards, Peter, so you're about to get one in the mail. So you
and
don't have
you
to
know
keep
what?
it.
That's you know what?
You don't have to keep it for any
That's
length of
fine.
time.
I'm happy to yeah, and one or two, I'm happy to have them. You know what I mean? But if I got
Yeah.
a thank you note from every single person whose birthday dinner I went to, who I gave a gift to, who like all of that stuff, if I kept every single one of those for even a month, I'm gonna be honest, I don't think I could. I think Sarah would probably start tossing them
Just
without
start tossing them
telling
away.
me because she'd
See,
be like,
I feel
"You
so
don't know
touched
they're
when
here."
people write me a letter. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. That's funny. What about at work? How does like in a workplace, how are they showing, hey, you did a good job. We appreciate your effort. We appreciate the extra time, whatever. Is that like a company shout out? Is it an email? Are there, you don't have to tell us what company you work for, but just tell us, is there a method? Do you see people showing gratitude at work for jobs well done?
Yeah, so my company has like um a quarterly award that they give out to somebody within the organization that has like a good idea. The idea doesn't have to like pan out. Like they gave it out today at the company meeting. The idea they haven't built this thing yet. He just had this idea and they think it's a great idea and they're going to see if they can make it work. But because it was a great idea, they're going to try and run with it and he got the award. Um for me personally, I don't get shout outs. Kind of not to toot my own horn, but I'm one of the unsung heroes. People don't really know the volume of work that my team does. Um, so a lot of it is just kind of it's whatever. Personally, when I get more money, and that's when I feel like people are grateful for me because they
Yeah,
say, "I
getting a
see
raise.
you. I see that you're doing more. Yeah, or even a bonus. Like,
Just
I
a
see
bonus,
that
yeah.
you're doing additional work, so here's some additional money, versus
Yeah.
versus someone either saying, and part of me doesn't honestly know which would be worse, if someone said, I see all the extra work you're doing and we're not going to pay you anymore for it. Or if they said, oh, I literally didn't even realize you were doing all that extra work. Like, I don't honestly
Mm,
know which one of
yeah.
those would feel worse. As far as a general rule of thumb, though, we get we have a channel in the corporate Slack that's called High Fives, and if anybody does something, they go above and beyond, they can give a shout out there. If someone does like a really good job on something and they want to do it, share something globally, there's an email that goes out and people will reply all, which just bugs the bananas out of me. They'll reply all, oh yeah, no,
Oh,
great job. And it's like, you're just doing that so that people say you saw that you sent the email. You could have just replied and been done with it anyway. So some of that in a corporate setting, just it falls flat, because it's like, you're responding to get your own kudos. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
uh, it's very
Well, I guess it's good that,
situationally dependent.
yeah. I guess I do think it's good that companies acknowledge when someone's doing a good job or has gone above and beyond, even if it's just a quick email, because, everybody needs to feel like someone's noticing and someone is grateful for their effort. A lack of gratitude can really make people feel like they're not important, they haven't contributed, they haven't done anything, when they really have. Um, so obviously I just already said I like cards. If someone takes time to write a card to me, that's just so much more important. It didn't have to be bought; it can just be written. But I love words because I'm
Mm-hmm.
just a word person. But I
Mm-hmm.
also see gratitude in acts of service because that's one of my love languages. So if someone sees how busy I am and they serve me or they offer to take something off my plate, that communicates gratitude to me. If I'm really crazy busy and Rock steps in and says, "Hey, I will let me do this," or I'll take care of this part of cleaning, or I'll run that errand, that shows gratitude as opposed to, "Gosh, I see how busy you are," and keep going. you know, um, Sometimes I want someone to help me. You know that that shows that someone is grateful for the effort that I put in. So um, anyway, and I think sometimes we show gratitude. Okay, just like a heart of gratitude, just by how we live our lives in seemingly unimportant ways. So a heart of gratitude, um, waiting patiently in line. I'm grateful that I get to buy these goods at the store. I can stand here in line in this, whatever. Just ingratitude makes us not do some things, but I think gratitude can make us do things like wait patiently in line, not flipping out when someone makes a mistake, like at a restaurant, they get your order wrong. Um, Taking care of things that we own, being a good steward of our cars and our homes and our yards and our clothes and the things that we've spent hard-earned money on. We're grateful for them, and things that people have given us by stewarding those things well. And then I think we show gratefulness for the people in our lives by treating them with patience and respect and generosity. So I think having a heart of gratitude in general can make you live a whole different life than a heart of ingratitude that kind of bleeds and can make a mess all over everybody, because we're just unkind and we're not pleasant to be around. Um, so,
Mm-hmm.
in general, Peter, what are some ways that you see gratitude being played out, just like in everyday life? And I mean, like the big gratitude for just I'm alive, I have my health, the sun is shining, you know, God is good and taking care of things even though life is hard. How do you see gratitude being just just displayed in people's lives or in society?
Um, I'd say a lot of it is the attitude with which you approach a lot of things. If I'm, if I go to a restaurant, it's because I don't want to cook. So I'm going to be kind to the person bringing my food. I'm going to leave a tip because I want them to know that I'm grateful that they were there to serve me. I'm going to treat them like a human being, and be kind to them. It's really easy to, when we go out on a date, it's really easy for me to just like focus on my wife. Go figure. But remember, like, no, she's important and she's the priority, but she's not the only thing happening right now. So let's remember there's other people here. Let's not speak too noisily if we can help it. And just remember that I am one of many people, and as many things as I have going on in my life, other people have just as many. And just giving people grace when they have a problem. I heard
What about when they
recently
cut you off in traffic?
a quote that, yeah, that one's a little bit harder. I'm going to be honest. A lot of the time, if I'm like really on it, I try and stick to, you know what? They're probably running later than I am. Then you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because especially like on the way to work, like in the morning, I'm like, nobody is like racing to get to work because they really just love being there. You know what I mean? Most of the time,
Right,
people are
right.
racing to get to work because they're late. So I'm like, you know what?
Uh,
I left in time. I'm okay. Sometimes I'm that person that cuts people off and I don't realize it. And it's, you know what? It's because I'm running late. I don't cut people off out of habit, you know? But one of the things that I kind of try and like keep front of mind is, I think it's called Hanlon's razor. Never assume malice where incompetence will suffice as an explanation. Like most people are not actually trying to like ruin your day. Like there's not very many people that actually wake up and say, I want to make the world miserable for everyone I encounter. They're just
true.
ignorant of your situation. You know what I mean? They don't know what's
Yeah,
going on with you. Should they look beyond themselves a little bit more? Probably. But I don't most people are not thinking, you know what, I'm going to try and cut off every Toyota that I see
yeah,
on the way to work today. They're not
that's
thinking
true.
like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That truck won't get over. You know what? He's probably trying to ride the lane so he can stay awake. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
trying to keep in mind that other people, because we think the best of ourselves, the worst of others, remembering that these are other people. And, when I cut someone off, I feel bad about it. And I'm grateful that people don't turn it into more than anything else, more than what it
yeah.
is. So being
That
grateful
makes
for
sense.
when other people don't don't try and light me up. You know what I mean? I
Yeah,
don't
show
try
patience
and turn
toward
it
you.
into anything
Yeah,
more than it. Yeah, exactly. So I try and show
yeah,
patience towards other people because other people show patience towards me.
sure. I think that's good. Well, and I think, gratitude grows. So the more we learn to practice gratitude, the easier it becomes. And then it's just a lifestyle as opposed to something that we have to intentionally say, oh, be grateful. It just becomes a habit, a good mental habit. But I do think there are things that we have to do to work that muscle. So do you do something, Peter, to keep a list of things that are grateful for? I I have years ago I had a gratitude journal and I haven't done it for a really long time, but I know that some people do that. So do you keep a gratitude journal or a regular list of things that you're grateful for?
Yeah, I have I've slowly developed a little journal format for myself that I try and do every single morning. And one of the things that I do in that journal format is, I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for. And that can be like big overarching, like, I am grateful for God's grace for me. And sometimes it is something as banal as, I am grateful that Costco sells hot dogs for $1.50. Like it's anything
Yeah.
that I can think of in that moment that I'm grateful for. I am grateful that when I get a flat tire, I can work from home that day. Like whatever. And I write those things down in my gratitude journal. But then, like you said, it grows. It's I try and treat other people as I want to be treated. So what I do is social media's got enough garbage on it to begin with. I'd really rather see some more positive things on there. So what I do is after I write those 3 things down in the morning, I turn around and I post on social media the 3 things I'm grateful for that day. Now, there might be a
Oh,
a
good.
different thing here or there. You know, I'm not putting everything that I'm grateful for down in a journal. I'm putting everything that I'm grateful for down in the journal, and then I'm tweaking it for public consumption.
Sure.
So there might be 1 or 2 things different once or twice a week. But generally speaking, I just try and post what it is that I'm grateful for so that people can see that and try and think, oh, what am I grateful for? Do I have 3 things to be
Oh,
grateful
that's a great
for? Well,
idea.
surely I do. I'm
Hmm.
looking at this on a cell phone. Like, as long as it's not like, as long as the screen on your cell phone is not cracked to the point where it's slicing your fingers open to use it, that's something you can be grateful for every single day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So just trying to
I have
bring a
seen that. I
little
have
bit more
seen your
positivity to
posts.
people's
I think
lives.
that's good.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's setting a good example. I was thinking about, gratitude's important and it helps us and it benefits everybody else. It benefits us. And I've even heard that, in our brains, the, the part that like when you're feeling grateful and you're thinking of gratefulness, you cannot think of gratefulness and like depression at the same time. Those 2 parts of the brain can't run at the same time. So if you're feeling depressed, if you're worried, if you're upset, and you practice gratitude, that side of the brain, that part of the brain will cancel out the worry, the anxiety, all of that piece. Um, and so that's just how God's designed us. Um, but I was looking in the Bible to see, okay, well, what does God say about gratitude? There's a verse in Colossians 3, verses 12 through 15 that says, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, which is something to be grateful for, clothe yourselves with
Mhm.
compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if you ever have a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these put on love, which binds them together in perfect unity. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you were called to peace. And be thankful. So all of those things are non-negotiables. We are supposed to be compassionate. We are supposed to be gentle and patient and forgive one another and let the peace of Christ be in our hearts. So when he says and be thankful, it's kind of a command. You are supposed to be grateful and thankful, experience
Mhm.
gratitude. That's a not an option for those of us who would call ourselves Christians. And we have so much to be grateful for. So,
Mhm.
I think our overall gratitude is actually kind of takes the temperature on our walk with God. Because when we are
Mhm.
really grateful for everything that He has done for us in Jesus Christ, that should be the root of all of our gratitude for the world and to others. Because if I'm really concentrating and thankful and grateful for what He has done for me and everything that He's given me and shown me and forgiven me, um, it's so much easier to practice gratitude. When I
Mhm.
lose sight of that, then we just get more preoccupied. So, I just want to encourage people that, this is the month of Thanksgiving. This is November. So that's why we did a piece on gratitude. But, it's a little cliche, but it's also, just a good time to really be thinking about practicing gratitude. So, a good study this month would be to search the scriptures and see how many times thankfulness, gratitude, gratefulness show up in scripture. You can just, if you're old school millennial, old school boomer, you can use a concordance. If you are Gen X, Millennial, Gen Z, get on BibleGateway.com and just put thankfulness or gratefulness or gratitude in the search bar, and you'll see all the verses that come up that have that idea or even that exact words. And I also like the daily list thing, Peter. I'm going to try to do that this month and just start a new habit of developing a heart posture of really being grateful. And then letting that maybe set an example for other people as well. But at least for me and for my heart to just practice some more gratitude. So, any last thoughts? We have just a few minutes left. Do you have any other last thoughts on gratitude that you would share or ideas that you would have, Peter?
I had one and it went away.
No, that's okay.
I
Do you and
guess.
Sarah tell each other thank you for little things? Like, thank you for doing the laundry. Thank you for setting the table. Do you guys do that?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, all the time. All the
Yeah,
time.
I think it makes a difference.
You know, oh, it absolutely does. It absolutely makes a difference. One of the, I'm more of an acts of service kind of person. As far as like showing gratitude, and she definitely receives it that way. So like literally earlier tonight, our eating schedules didn't match up very well today. So she ordered some food online just for her because I wasn't hungry at the time. I ate right before I came home from work. And she was like, I already ordered it. Will you just go pick it up? I was like, yeah, sure. So I just ran out and picked the food up, and I walked in, I grabbed it, I came home. That was, it wasn't nothing, but like it wasn't a big deal for me to do that for her necessarily. But it meant that she got to rest longer.
Mm-hmm.
We had some big noises in our apartment today, so she did not get the nap that she was expecting. And she was up later last night than she planned to be, just couldn't fall asleep. So for her to be able to stay in bed just that much longer, to not have to, walk out to her car, drive on the road with other people at dinner time, like she was just very, very grateful. And she said that several times, not just like in that moment, but later she was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for going to get that. I was like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Of course. When our work schedules aren't like 100% like in sync. So there'll be times where I come home from work and she spent hours cleaning the apartment. Okay, that is such a load off my mind because I I don't wake up early to clean, and it feels weird to
Mm-hmm.
stay up late and clean because like she's asleep. I'm not gonna vacuum at 11 o'clock at night. You know what I
Right.
mean? So um when it comes to things like that, I'm very grateful for her,
Mm-hmm.
you know, doing a lot more cleaning because she's home during the day a little bit more because her work schedule is different. So for her to be able to do that means that when I get home at 4:30, we don't have to spend time cleaning. We can spend time cooking and being together and running errands and like
Mm-hmm.
doing stuff like that instead of not completely isolating, but like you ever tried to clean something with somebody else? It's awful.
Nah,
Like,
you
I
can't. You
think a
have to
car is probably
divide
the
and conquer.
smallest thing that you can clean with someone, and it's because you can have one person in the front seat and one person in the back seat. I think that's the smallest thing that you can really clean at the same time. Maybe doing dishes if one person is on wash and one person is on dry. Other than that, cleaning is pretty much a
Yeah.
solo activity.
Yep.
So,
Well, I think that's
we
great.
do say
Yeah.
thank you a
No,
lot.
I think that's great. I think practicing gratitude in your closest relationships is a great place to start. So, husbands and wives, significant others, parents to kids, kids to parents, just thank you, and being grateful and having an attitude of gratitude. So, that's just a good place to start, everybody. All right. Well, thank you, Peter, for
I would add on one more
sharing
thing.
about gratitude. Oh, absolutely. What's that?
As far as like, closest relationships, I talk to my manager more than just about anybody else at work. And I know he does a good job of like hiding it, but I know that he catches a lot of heat for stuff that's not necessarily his fault.
Mm,
And so I try and make sure I tell him, thank you for things. Like, I can tell when he's catching heat from leadership for something that we're doing, but it's the best way to do it for us and for the customer. But because it's not the way that leadership came up with it, they want it done differently. So he gets caught in the middle between us actually doing the thing and his boss telling him how to do the thing. And I know he's not the only one doing that. There's managers like that all over corporate America that take heat for stuff that they shouldn't need to, but they're willing to for their people. So, on the subject of do things, practice gratitude in your closest relationships, you're probably not going to be closest with your manager necessarily, but you're going to spend a lot of time with them, and proximity can breed a sense of contempt if you're not careful. So heading that off with an attitude of gratitude is way, way easier than walking into work one day and going like, man, I can't stand him anymore. You know what I mean? So focus on the gratitude.
I think that's great.
Won't get to that point.
That's great. I also just remembered we were talking about this earlier with some other women that October is Pastor Appreciation Month. So, gosh, if anybody needs to have gratitude expressed, it would be pastors who are just doing way more work than anybody really realizes. So I'm going to remember to. I actually sent our pastors
their busiest season.
Oh my gosh! Yes, absolutely. I actually sent our pastors a little message on Slack, just saying that I appreciated them, appreciate who they are and what they do, and I know they're doing way more than anybody sees. So, if you guys get this, you'll be listening to this podcast in November, but it is never too late to tell a pastor that you appreciate them. So, if you didn't do it in October,
Agreed.
Go ahead and do it in November. Anyway, all right. Well, we're going to say goodnight, and I hope that everybody practices gratitude. And thank you for joining us on the Relentless Endeavor Let's Talk podcast to get the generations talking. And if this is your first time joining us, be sure and go back and listen. This is our 6th podcast, so you can go back and listen to 1 through 5 and a variety of other topics too. We'll talk to you next time.
The views expressed in this podcast are personal opinions and do not reflect those of any organization. The speakers are not licensed therapists, and their insights are based on their own experiences. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. Listeners are encouraged to seek qualified professionals for specific guidance. And by accessing this podcast, you agree that the individuals speaking in this podcast are not liable for any outcomes or consequences that may arise as a result.